Oops. Well, I got obsessed with this camera and the white balance, which you can see is really weird. And I wasted a bunch of time, trying to figure out the white balance on that. And now I don't even have the microphone in the right spot. And it's not cooperating either. Okay. And okay. All right, here we are. Phaladeepika with a heavy duty brightness that I can't get rid of. So, I don't know, let's see. It's not really any better. Like I said, I've been sitting around for the last 5 minutes trying to figure out why my whole face looks like geisha makeup. But let's ignore that. I'll stop looking at the picture. Let's talk about Phaladeepika, the houses. This is going to wrap up Mantreshwar's. Let me even make sure that I'm live. Everybody's here, yeah? I am live. Let's wrap up. This stream will wrap up Phaladeepika's discussion of the houses, the initial information that he gives about houses and what they symbolize. Which means that so far we have covered his initial presentation on signs and his initial presentation on houses. The next week we'll move into what in the book is chapter 2, and we'll begin discussing what the individual planets symbolize. So for today, we have one more thing. After he goes through and discusses each house individually, he then has a small section at the end of chapter 1 which groups the houses. So he's going to identify a couple of important groups, and let's talk about that today. Yeah. I'm still thinking about what could be wrong with this camera. It's ridiculous. Anyway. So, the one way that he's going to group the houses together is by identifying 3 angles. Do you know what I'm talking about? Actually, this is one of my favorite geometric shapes. It's a 12-pointed star. How do you draw a 12-pointed star? There's even a weird thing in the shopping mall near my house. There's a place for like getting clothes for a wedding that's called 12, Norma Jean. It's Japanese, they make up the craziest things. And the logo is a 12-pointed star. I love it. Do you know how you draw a 12-pointed star? It's very simple. You just draw 3 squares and then rotate them 30 degrees. So when we say 3 angles, we're going to get this 12-pointed star shape by having 3 squares and rotate each one 30 degrees. The primary way of grouping the houses together is to group them along these 3 squares. And these squares are called angles. Do you know why they're called angles? I mean, why angles? Angles could be anything, right? When you say angle, you imply a correct angle or proper angle or a right angle. If your angle is not correct or proper, etc., then you specify what it is. But just leaving the word as angle implies a 90-degree angle. So when people say, I mean, these days language usage has changed, but when these speakers, the older speakers, would say a word like angle, they're talking about a 90-degree angle. So that's why when we call these squares in the houses, we call them angles. And this other thing we call a trine, right? That's also an angle. Why don't we call it an angle or a triangle? We call it a trine because we focus on the fact that it's tri. It's a 60 degree. There's going to be 360 degrees in there. Three times 60. So what he presents first is to group the houses along 3 angles. One angle will proceed from the first house. The next angle will proceed from the next house. And the next angle will proceed from the next house. You get it? So imagine your sky has a wheel and divide it into 12 equal sections. Put the ascendant wherever you want to put it. Let's say you put it on the left, as is typically done. Draw a square from that ascendant. The points of the square will fall in, of course, the first house where you started, the 4th house, the 7th house, and the 10th house. That's your first angle of houses. Now, instead of starting at the first house, start at the 2nd house. Draw another square. That will fall from 2. The next point will be at 5. The next point will be at 8. The next point will be at 11. And then it'll come back to 2. If the first one is 1, 4, 7, 10, then just plus 1 to each one. So it's 1, 5, 8, 11. Then take your 3rd angle. Thank you, Bardo. Then take your 3rd angle. To get your 3rd angle, just start drawing that square at the 3rd house. The first point will be at the 6th, and then the 9th, and then the 12th, and then back to the 3rd. Those are the 3 angles. So he says the first angle, which includes 1, 4, 7, and 10, are called by terms like Kendra, Kantaka, and Chatushtaya. So what do these words mean? The meaning of the words will. Let me actually just check my email for a second. I just did ask somebody about some Greek thing. See if I got a reply. No reply yet. What does Kendra mean? Kendra is not a Sanskrit word. Kendra is a Indic pronunciation of a Greek word. The Greek word is kentron. Kentron. Do you know the English word central? You know how the letter actually C is kind of weird in English? Where sometimes it works like a K and sometimes it works like an S. So if you know the word central, right? How do you spell it? Not with an S, with a C. C-E-N-T-R. Center, right? Central. What's that smiley face? It's okay, Tanya. Yeah, central. If you know the word central, but just to take the letter C, and instead of pronouncing it with the S version of C, pronounce it with a K. Kentro. That's from Greek kentra. Kentra means the center. So Kendra is just the way that the Indians pronounced it. Instead of Kentra, they made it Kendra. It means the center. Now, think about the way that the way that charts have been drawn over the centuries. When you look at modern astrology on the internet and everything, you're almost always looking at wheels. They always usually draw a chart as a wheel just because it's a literal 1 to scale model of the sky. But when you look back towards medieval astrology from any part of the world, I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but this isn't the Indian way of drawing a chart. This was just the medieval way of drawing a chart. They didn't only use wheels, they had other ways of drawing a chart. And in India, they still like to do it these ways. But they used to use squares and diamonds and so forth. So if you've ever gotten a chart report from me, you see the way that the chart appears on the first page. You got a rectangle, and you put an X from one corner to the next. So you divide the rectangle into, you can do it with a square if you want. I do it with a rectangle. Take a square or a rectangle. So you stylize a circle to a square. Make an X from one corner to the other inside the square. Now you got 4 corners of the sky. East, west, up and down. Then make another square. So here's your first square, X, and then another square, like that. Then you've got your medieval style of chart, which is still in use in northern India. What is that? Why do it like that? Why not use a wheel? Why do it like that? Because when you're doing interpretation, which is primarily house-based, which is the way that most of medieval astrologers were doing their interpretations, and which is the way that I like to do my interpretations, this type of a chart puts your focus on the houses more than the signs, or more than the aspects. A wheel will really show you the aspects very clearly. And today's astrology is mostly based on aspects. Today's popular astrology throughout the world is mostly aspectual. But the older forms of astrology were mostly house-oriented. Where's this house lord? What's affecting what house? And when you draw a chart with X's, it shows the houses more, because the houses are always in exactly the same spot, and what's in the center, the kendra, the center of that chart. You got a square, an X, and another square inside it. That other square becomes the center of the chart. And that's houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. So these 4 houses are considered to be the center of the sky. Why? Because we drew it in a chart like that? No, we drew the chart like that to reflect the point that they're the center of the sky. So why are they considered the center of the sky? We'll go back to the streams that we've done over the past few weeks. Whenever Mantreshwar came to house 1, 4, 7, or 10, he told you something important about the physicality of the house. With 1, he said it's the Hora Lagna, it's the place where things rise. With 4, he said it's the Hibuka, the lowest place. With 7, he said it's the Asta, the place where things set. And with 10, he said it's Vyoma, the sky right above your head. These 4 houses are actually the anchor, the central anchor for all the rest of the houses, as I was explaining to you with the meaning of the houses. All of the house meaning is based on how a house is related to one of these 4 points. 1, 4, 7, and 10 have their obvious meanings by being the place where things rise, the place where things set, or the most underground or the most exposed. 1 is where things rise, 7 is where things set, 4 is the most hidden, and 10 is the most exposed. And then the other 8 houses mean what they mean because of how they are related to the house, which is the center of their part of the triangle. If you draw the square, and then you put an X through it to get 4 triangles, the center of each triangle is the kendra, the central house, inside that angle, inside that part of the sky. So these 4 houses, 1, 4, 7, and 10, they're called central. Kantaka means the main places, and Chatushtaya means the 4. The 4, like as if these are the 4 that are the most important. So these 4 houses are very important in a chart. They're like the 4 corners of a house or a building. When you build something, the corners have to be strong. If the corners collapse, the whole house collapses. So similarly, if the houses 1, 4, 7, and 10 are weak, then the whole chart is going to be weak. If the houses 1, 4, 7, and 10 are strong, then the rest of the chart will survive anything else that might be not so good in it. So do you understand what I am telling you? It's the first house related to the 7th. Every house is related to each other. But the first house is the opposite from the 7th. The first house is where things rise, the 7th house is where things set. So they're related by being opposite. You understand? Why these things are called? This is one group of houses. What do these 4 houses have in common? They're the most important places amongst all the 12 houses. Why are they most important? Because they're the central points. What are they the center of? They're the center of their triangle of the sky. The first house is the center of the east. The 4th house is the center of below. The 7th house is the center of the west, and the 10th house is the center of above. You guys are not even chatting today. Now, these are the angles. This is the primary angle. The Kentra means the main angle, or Kantaka means the main angle. This is the main angle. But there are 2 other angles as well. The secondary angle, the one that starts from the 2nd house. So the house after each one of the primaries is collectively called a secondary angle. What's the word for this? The word is panapara. What does panapara mean? Again, it doesn't mean anything. It's just the way that Indians pronounced a Greek word. The Greek word is epanapore or epanaphore. But in Sanskrit, perhaps ancient Sanskrit may have utilized the F sound. But the Vedic Sanskrit down to the classic Sanskrit and into modern Sanskrit never uses an F sound. The reason for it is that it puts too much spit. Literally, it makes too much junk fly out of your mouth to make an F sound. So they don't have words that use it. And they know about it phonetically, and they have a spot for it on the grid of their phonetics, but they don't have it in usage. So the Greek is epanaphora. But Indian spelling of foreign words will tend to put a PH wherever there's an F. P, that's their closest to a F, is P. So it became panapara. The Greek word is epanaphora. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out what that Greek word means. Maybe somebody watching knows. But these are simply the 2nd houses. When I find out what the Greek word means, maybe it will be more clear. I think it means it's simply these houses 2, 5, 8, and 11 are secondary in their nature, or supportive of the primary houses. And then the final angle, the 3rd square, when you rotate the square one more time, so now it's based on 3, 6, 9, and 12. Now the 3rd square is based on 3, 6, 9, and 12. Those guys are called apoklima. Again, that's just an Indian way of saying apoklimata, which is a Greek word, which means final, apocalypse, the end, right? It's the final angle. He does not say, he just describes these 3 points as if they're important. He doesn't say what the grouping will be used for, but just keep it in your mind that these are the 3 groups. There's a primary angle, which is 1, 4, 7, and 10. There's a secondary angle, which is the next bunch of houses, 2, 5, 8, and 11. And then there's the apoklima angle, which is the final angle, which is 3, 6, 9, and 12. Something in 3, 6, 9, and 12 is the least influential. Something in 2, 5, 8, and 11 is middling influential. And something that's in 1, 4, 7, and 10 is most influential. Any question about this? Yes, Tanya, that's right. The Kendra house are centrally important. Of the Kendras, I believe I get this from Mantreshwar elsewhere in this book. I can't remember exactly where I remember it, but not every house in the square is of equal importance. So particularly with the first square, the Kendra, the main square, the main angle, the most influential house is a toss-up between 1 and 10 in different ways. So it's the most influential house is the first house. Then 10 is a runner-up. And then 4 and then 7 are the lesser influence than those other 2. All right, now let's take a look at another way that he groups houses. Eh? I thought there was more than that. 1 second. Let me see what this is. Well, most planets in Apocryphal houses make someone less powerful. Yeah. That's one part of the theory. But remember, if you got a lot of planets in the same angle as each other, then there's other parts of interpretive theory that kick in, because now these planets are in the primary angle to each other. Right? Let's say if I have a chart where every planet is in Apocrypha, which means either it's in house 3, 6, 9, or 12. So I might think, hey, here's a really weak chart. There's not a single planet in the main Kendra, and everything is in the tertiary Kendra. Now, but I better now start to realize, well, that means that all these planets are in primary Kendra to the moon, all these planets are in primary Kendra to the sun, all these planets are in primary Kendra to each other. So even though to the ascendant it becomes weak, for the rest of the planets they're getting strong. So you got to be careful with oversimplifying or only using one theory. Alpha is asking if planets have aspect rules like houses. If houses have aspect rules like planets, no, they don't. This is the geometrics of the thing. The planets which are on the cardinal points, east, west, above, north and south, up and down, east, west, north, and east, west, up and down, those houses are of primary importance. They're in the primary places. And then the other ones are lesser importance. So it's not about aspects, it's about their relative positions. Let me check this text. I thought there was another group. Maybe somehow I got an older version of my file or something. Yeah, what happened? I wrote all this out. What? This is terrible. Oh, okay. Here it is. He has some other groups. He's got good, and he's going to group houses into good and bad. Okay. What if a lot of planets are in the main Kendra? The chart is very strong. Okay. He is going to basically say some of the houses are good, some of the houses are bad. Now, he says this. There are some houses which are called Lina, and there are some houses which are called Dukkha. So the Lina houses are almost exactly the same as the Apocrypha houses. Remember the Apocrypha, the third square is 3, 6, 9, and 12. Those are almost... He's also going to make a category called Lina. Lina means invisible. He's going to make a category of houses called invisible, but he's not going to include the 9th house in it. It's going to be the same as that third square, except for the 9th house. And instead, it's going to include the 8th house. So the Lina houses are like a little bit of a distorted square. It's 3, 6, not 9, but 8, and 12. 3, 6, 8, and 12. They're Lina. Lina means something will disappear, or be hidden, or concealed. So the idea here is almost the same as Apocrypha, but you see it's kind of taking the 9th house out of this group a bit, and it's putting the 8th house into it. A planet that's in this house gets Lina. It gets hidden. It becomes invisible. It's harder to see. You're not likely to get big, tangible, abundant results from it, materially, visibly speaking, when it's in 3, 6, 8, or 12. Now, another group, that's one type of a bad house. It's an invisible house. It's a house where when you go in there, nobody can see you. Then there's this other group of houses called Sukkah Houses or Dukhstanas. Dustana. It's almost the same as the invisible houses. Except don't include the third house. It's 6, 8, and 12. 6, 8, and 12 are dukkha. They're unhappy houses. They're difficult. So if you get a planet in 6, 8, or 12, it's more likely to indicate dukh, which means difficulty, distress, unhappiness. So 12 and 6, they got all three of these things lined up. So think about this now. Put all the layers together. 12 and 6 are apaklima, lina, and dukh. They're final houses, they're invisible houses, and they're sad houses. 8 is an invisible house and a sad house, but not a final house. And 3 is a final house and an invisible, but not a sad house. So 3, so really the truly invisible houses is like 6 and 12. Planets really have a hard time in 6 and 12. But the nature of the invisibility is also different because we also have a concept called Upachaya. So, and he also mentions this, Upachaya. There's another way of grouping houses called Upachaya. And that includes 3, 6, 10, and 11. So let's just bear in mind the 3 and the 6 part now. Because 3 and 6 are invisible. And 6 is a dukh. But they're also upachaya. So let's try to understand what the word upachaya means and put the whole puzzle together. Chaya means to pile something up. And upachaya, not chaya means a shadow, but chaya means to pile something up. Upachaya means to gradually pile something up or to go on top of a pile. To go on top of a hill. So these are called the increase houses, the houses which gradually get more. They will grow. The things in these houses will grow. So this is okay for 10 and 11. It's not confusing to understand for 10 and 11. But how do you understand this with 3 and 6? The 3 and 6 are houses which will increase and grow, yet 3 and 6 are invisible. They're linastan. 3 and 6, 8 and 12 are invisible, but 3 and 6 are also upachaya, which means that they will gradually rise up. 8 and 12, no. So of the invisible houses, it's actually 8 and 12 that are really invisible. That actually makes sense. And physically speaking, you should just go at different times. Every time you go outside, ask yourself what house the sun is in. Try to understand that. That's a very good exercise for getting familiar with the houses. Go outside shortly after sunrise. The sun is in the 12th house. Try to look at it. It's lina. It's very difficult to see. Not only is the sun very difficult to see, but everything is very difficult to see when the sun is in the 12th house. It's the angle that it's hitting. When the sun is at the low angle, people put on sunglasses, people hold their hand in front of their eyes, people put down the visor in their car. That's in the early morning, 12th house. And if you go out right before the sunset, that's when the sun is in the 8th house. Guess what? People putting down their visors, putting on the sunglasses, putting their hand right in front of their eyes. because things are difficult to see, very difficult to see when the sun is at that angle, when it's in 8 and 12. And hence it signifies things which are not seen. They're difficult to see. Invisibility. Lina. 3 and 6 are included in Lina, but they're included in Upachaya. So the putting the whole puzzle together, what 3 and 6 are all about is really your internal manliness. 3 and 6 is your internal manliness. So these are internal or invisible things, but not weak. They're internal strengths. This is what you can understand when you put together the fact that 3 and 6 are Lina, or invisible, but Upachaya. They grow and they get stronger. So 3 is, let me see, maybe I wrote this down. 2 of the good and 2 of the not good houses are associated with Upachaya, growth and increase. Houses 10 and 11 indicate how we are awarded positive results, so that's easy to understand. But 3 and 6 indicate the strength to resolve strife. The strength and resolve to strive for growth and success. So with these Upachaya houses, they're all indicating growth, increase, success. But 3 and 6 are Lina Upachaya, which means this is your inner, what you require on the inside to be able to grow and succeed is 3, ambition, and 6, which is toughness and strength and tenacity and force. Make sense? Any questions? Heiko Hashiguchi. Hashiguchi, the opening of the bridge. Alf asks if Saturn in the first would it aspect all the houses in the Kendra? No, wait for us to describe aspects and then you'll understand aspects. Bardo, a question, why did you decide to show only the Rashi and D9 on your wheel chart? Because those are the 2 most significant divisions of the chart. And actually, I did go about making a wheel with all the divisions, and it was like this thick. So it's not so practical. What else we got here in terms of questions? But we are fascinated with sunrise and sunset. The sunrise itself is the first house, and the sunset itself is the 7th house. When the sun rises, it's not blinding. It's actually clarifying. Things are coming into view. Hence, the first house is about things becoming clear and visible. I used to actually sometimes be in the desert in California when the sun would rise, and you would actually see the scene would go from black and white to color, and you would be able to tell if something was a coyote or a cactus. As the sun would rise, things would come into clarity. So that's the first house. The sunrise itself symbolizes the visibility. The 12th house is the next stage after it, when the sun comes up into the sky. So like if the sun rises at 7, then you want to go out at about 7:30 or 8 and look at this. Try to look around then. That's the 12th house effect. Similarly, if the sunset is the 7th house, if you want to experience the 8th house, if the sun sets at 7 o'clock at p.m., let's say, go at about 6 o'clock and try to look around, look at the sun. You'll experience the 8th house effect. Sun gazing, it's not mentioned. Why is 3 not a dusthana? Because it doesn't cause pain. 6 and 12 are the easiest to understand as dusthanas. And 6 and 12 are the worst dusthanas. So, but people like to say, but 8 and 12 are the worst. No, aren't they? No, 8 and 12 are the most invisible. 12 is really, really getting everything bad about it. It's the most invisible, it's the most sad, and it's the final house. But when you talk about houses that are difficult, it's going to be 12 and 6. Why? The 12th house is eroding the first house, and the 6th house is supporting the 7th. Literally, the 6th house is underneath the western horizon, and literally the 12th house is just above the eastern horizon. So the 12th house erodes the east. The east is you. So the 12th house represents all those things that we talked about the last time we had a stream, which was all erosion, dissolution, decay, disintegration of things. Things becoming invisible. Things losing their physicality. The 6th house represents support of the 7th. The 7th house represents other people. So the 6th house are supporters of others. So the 12th house is stuff that detracts from you, and the 6th house is thing that adds to others. So now there are these places that are going to bring you sukkah. They're going to take away your sukkah or give it to somebody else. 3rd house is not like that. The 8th house, why is the 8th house included as a dukkha sthana is actually more of an interesting question. And it's because the 8th house, the type of dukkha from the 8th house is more about critique and criticism. Okay? A question from Kona Clan with a $5 donation. Thank you so much. The 3rd and 6th house are good for combat sports. The 3rd and 6th are great for every sports. 3rd and 6th are your manliness. They're the internal manliness. Men are competitive. I mean, women can be competitive, but that's because they have manliness in their makeup. So 3rd and 6th houses are macho. And if you want to do sports, you better be macho. Especially if you want to do combat sports. The 5th house, I don't think it's really sports, but it's skills and entertainment, as you noticed. But the part of the sports which has to do with the intellectual part of the sports would rely on 5 and 3. And the part of the sports that relies on the physical power and execution is 3 and 6. So 3 is really, really crucial to both aspects of sports. Sure enough, go ahead and do a survey. Use the tropical zodiac and whole sign houses and do a survey of significant athletes. Mars in the 3rd house, Mars in the 3rd house, Mars in the 3rd house, Sun in the 3rd house, First Lord in the 3rd house, 10th Lord in the 3rd house, 3rd Lord in the 10th house, 3rd house, 3rd house, 3rd house. In 80% of the charts, you'll see it. And then the other 20% of the charts, it's something else that's cool about the 3rd house. Alpha, the book was written in the 14th century. So why is 3 not Dusthana? Oh, and 6 I mentioned. The author mentioned Duschakya and Duskritya, so why is it not a Dusthana? 3rd is your ferocity, which is your Duschakya, and 6th is Duskritya, which is bad deeds. The 6th is, but it doesn't. It's Dusthanas are the ones that cause the natives unhappiness. The Upachaya houses get better with age or with deeds. They get better with action. They allow you to act. They don't get better with age. I think this is just some web slinging of astrology. This interpretation should be true, and it's not, but it'll be true later in the future. Upachaya house doesn't mean it waits or it comes late or something. It means that this is the houses that rise up and increase. Doesn't necessarily mean over time. It means you're going to get your increase, you're going to get your success, you're going to get your prominence from these houses. If you want to be a prominent, famous person, you better not have a weak 10th house, a weak 11th house, a weak 3rd house, or a weak 6th house. Otherwise, you're not going to be a prominent, recognized person. That's cool, dreaming snail. 3rd house, 6th house swap, and the 3rd is also the 12th. It's kind of cool. Is the 6th house also enemies, Nikita? Of course, go and watch the stream in which we covered the 6th house. All right, I have one more thing to tell you. The good houses, the bad houses. The invisible houses are 3, 6, 8, and 12. The difficult houses are 6, 8, and 12. Where are the good houses? There's 8 of them. It's anything that's not invisible. Anything that's not a Lena house. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11 are Sukkah houses. Good houses. Lucky. 8 of the houses give you happiness. Four of them give you kind of are invisible, and 3 of them give you unhappiness. It's not a bad deal. It's not that the 3rd house gives unhappiness, but it's just not the most visible house. All right, so anything in 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11 will tend to support the native or provide them with enjoyment and happiness and pleasure. So especially therefore 10 and 11. Because 10 and 11 are good houses that are also Upachaya. Now, one more thing. We talk about squares, right? We started off the stream by talking about squares. This first square, the Kentra, the central square. The 2nd square, the Panapara. The 3rd square, the Apaklama. What about trines? People do make a big deal about trines. Anytime you've ever heard, which is basically every time you've ever heard about houses from Vedic astrologers, you probably hear about Dharma houses, Moksha houses. You always hear about Moksha houses because everybody wants to sound spiritual. Moksha house. Sometimes you might hear about a Dharma house. You might have wondered or implied that the other 2 Purusharthas or goals of life might be included in there. There's also Kama houses and Artha houses. And those are all based on triangles. I will tell you about those briefly now, but Mantreshwar doesn't give a damn about them. He doesn't mention them. The only thing that Mantreshwar mentions is the primary triangle. He just says, amongst the good houses are 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. And then he says, amongst all of those, the ones that are triangular to the ascendant are the best. So that means 5 and 9. 5 and 9 are the most pleasant, fortunate, blessing houses. So guess what? If you're putting all the puzzles together, 1, cool, it's a nice house. 2, it's a nice house. 4, it's a nice house. 5, it's a nice house, and it's a really nice house because it's triangular to the ascendant. So 4 too, right? 4 is a good house, and it's Kentra, central. 1 is a good house, and it's central. So 1, 2, it's got one good point to it. 4, yes. 5, yes. Wow. 7, okay, it's kind of in there with 1 and 4. 10, it's central. It's one of the good houses, and it's an Upachaya. 10 is a great house. 11, it's Upachaya, and it's a good house. So now also just think about putting everything together. 9 is a good house that's an angle. 10 is a good house that's central. That's a triangle. 10 is a good house that's central and an angle. 11 is a good house that's Upachaya. 9, 10, 11. Great houses. What? Look up at the sky. 10 is straight up. 9 is over there. And 11 is over there. Prime real estate. Those 3 houses are fantastic. Planets in those houses are great. 9, 10, 11, bingo, bango. We love it. It's Beverly Hills. 8 and 12, it's really hard to deal with stuff that's over there. I can't see it. 1 and 7 becomes important. Okay? So the stuff about this other stuff about Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, it's not in the Phaladeepika, but I'll briefly explain it to you. It's based on the fact that these 4 intrinsic goals to life, these are 4 intrinsic goals to life. Kama, pleasure, that's the primary or basic goal. Artha is security, to ensure your pleasure on the long term. So people want money, for example, as a common artha manifestation is the desire for money, or having money is artha. Because when you have money, you get pleasure. You go buy whatever you want. Third is dharma. Dharma is so people don't steal each other's money. So dharma is morals. It's just trying to enforce the pleasure. So the pleasure requires money. Money requires rules. So that we can have Kama more consistently. And then the fourth one is moksha, which is freedom. I'm tired of working for this pleasure. I just want to break. That's freedom. That's the fourth goal. So those 4 intrinsic goals to life are associated with the 4 cardinal directions. And because of being associated with the 4 cardinal directions, are associated with the 4 primary elements. Because the East is where things rise. Let me start with the first one, pleasure. Pleasure is the 7th house. That's sex and intercourse with people. So that's where you get pleasure from. Or people or things. Intercourse, interaction with things brings pleasure. 7th house. That's where the air is, the west. That's the breeze in the air. That's the air elements. Mula or root is in the west, the 7th house. So any house which is trine to 7 will have some variety of Kama to it. So trines to 7 is 3 and 11. That's considered to be one trine group of houses, not by Mantreshwar, but by many others. Then the next is Artha, right? To have security and stability. That's rooted underground, in the earth element. So the root for that principle of life or Artha is the 4th house. And any house that's trine to the 4th house will also be concerned with this topic of security and money. So, no. Sorry. That is rooted with the earth element, which oddly enough is in the 10th house. Because the earth element is with the south, and the 10th house is to the south. So this may be hemisphere specific. This may be one of the valid things that is hemisphere specific. Because the 10th house is the highest point, but the highest point for most of us points to the south. That's why it's confusing. So Artha, or your ability to make money and have security, is actually rooted in the 10th house career, and its trines are the 2nd and the 6th, which is like your family and your employment. And then the Dharma, which is the 3rd goal, is rooted in the East, which is where the sun rises. It's associated with the fire element. Fire element, it reveals right and wrong. It reveals yes and no, left and right, which is what Dharma is all about, what to do, what not to do. Any house which is trying to the first, which is 5 and 9, has that nature to it. It's Dharma. And then the 4th, which I got wrong before, is associated to the north. Believe it or not, the 4th house is associated to the north. Because when the sun is in the 4th, if you have to look at the sun when it's in the 4th, which you can't literally look at it because it's midnight, you would actually point north, unless you're in the southern hemisphere. So this is one thing, which houses represent which goal of life may be hemisphere specific. So 4, 8, and 12 are the trine that's based on that. This is one way of getting another 12-pointed star, is to use 4 triangles. So you can use 4 triangles, get a 12-point star. You can use 3 squares. The 3 squares thing, Mantreshwar mentioned. He finds it important. The 4 triangles, he didn't mention it. He doesn't find it important. Other people make a big deal out of it. So I just explained why other people think it's important, but it's not a part of this book. So just to recap before ending, we got several ways of grouping the houses from Mantreshwar today. First, he groups them into good and bad. The good houses are 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11. But the trines to the angle are even best. So amongst those, it's really 5 and 9 that are great houses. Then he says there's also Upachaya houses that indicate your growth. So 10 and 11 amongst the good houses are really great. Then he indicates some bad houses, some that are suffering, which is 6, 8, and 12, and some that cause invisibility, 3, or are not seen, 3, 6, 8, and 12. But 3 and 6 are also Upachaya. So they're the internal way that we grow. The internal requirements for growth and success are 3 and 6. So that leaves 8 and 12 as the really, truly difficult houses. Okay? That's one summary of the way that he grouped up the houses, and then he also talked about the importance of the Chatushtaya, the groups of 4. The primary group of 4 is Kentra, the central group of 4. It's houses 1, 4, 7, and 10. Those are the most important central focal points of the chart. And to any planet also, the anything which is in that position to that planet will be very supportive of it. That's the primary angle, 1, 4, 7, and 10. And then you just rotate that 30 degrees and you get the secondary angle where things are a bit medium in their importance. That would be 2, 5, 8, and 11. And then the third, or the final, of the Apoklam planets, which is the houses 3, 6, 9, and 12, which are the least important. That's what we learned today. Let me see if there's any interesting stuff in the chat. My phone buzzes. Thanks, Murray. She has the nerd glasses on in her emoji. Why is the 4th house a chill house? The focal point to 2 negative houses, 8 and 12. They're not negative. I mean, yeah, okay, they're negative. They're Duke. Come to the live stream actually in 2 days from now, because Shiva is going to say something very important about dukkha, and that it's not negative necessarily. But this question is, why is the 4th house, which is chill, the focal point to it's a focal point for a trine, which Mantreshwar doesn't even care about, but many people feel is important. It's the focal point for the moksha trine. Most people don't actually like moksha anyway, because moksha means sleeping, moksha means forgetting, moksha means death, even disappearing, getting out of the scene, getting out of the limelight. And that's why the 4th is the root for all those. The 4th is the innermost version, the innermost aspect of the self is defined by the 4th house. It's the inner heart. And so the 8th and the 12th are related with it. And also the fact that it's chill, 8 and 12 are also chill. They're linastana. Lina means chill, kind of like chill, unseen, quiet. M. What does it mean if the Lagna Lord is in the 12th house in the whole house chart, but the 11th house in the Bhava chart? It means there's 2 different ways of doing house systems. Forget about the Bhava chart. Bhava chart is not, don't use it. Use tropical signs and a whole sign house system, and learn how to do astrology with that. Kate, yes, I'm interested in the previous question too from M about how we relate midhaven and ascendant points. another house cusps out of their whole house in another house. You should take the midhaven as a point. The Bhava Chalit, or the dynamic house system of Porphyry, Shripati, and all these Placidius and all this stuff, is to take the midhaven as the 10th house cusp. Forget the idea that it's the 10th house cusp, just take it as a point. The midhaven is the literal apex for the sun. So what point does that, what house that point falls in reveals the, whatever would be symbolized by the apex, which is like career and impact on the world of the visible aspect of the person. So it's either going to, unless you're in extreme north or south latitudes, it's either going to be in the 10th, 11th, or 9th. So people with it in the 10th, it tends to be fairly just straightforward. People with it in the 11th, it gives a little bit of a hint that they're more on the artistic or pleasure-oriented side of life. People where it falls in the 9th, it gives a hint that they're a little bit more on the moral side of life. But it's just a small thing. Eighth Lord in the 8th house, Kona says. Eighth Lord in the 8th house is very strong. You won't just get serial killers and feared athletes. With 8th house and with the 8th Lord in the 8th house, you'll get people that are very, very strong. Live for a very long time. Persist for a very long time. Don't give up very easy. Kind of crocodile type of people. Okay. Time to get on with our days. And I'll see you in 2 days. Shiva has some interesting things to say. We'll study that in 2 days. Thank you very much.